Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are charting the course of, well, one of the most tumultuous, confusing, and frankly terrifying periods in 20th century history, China's Cultural Revolution, which officially ran from 1966 to 1976. Now, this event was massive, chaotic, and often self-contradictory. You've likely heard the broad strokes, but our mission today is to cut through all that noise. We want to understand exactly how it unfolded stage by stage, from that initial ideological spark right to the moment the whole course just stalled out. Okay, so let's unpack this. The launching pad wasn't subtle at all. It was a shocking declaration from Mao Zedong himself in May 1966. He started warning that representatives of the bourgeoisie were infiltrating the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. He said they were taking what he called the capitalist road. And this wasn't just, vague political rhetoric. It was basically a mandate for revolution against the very bureaucracy he had helped create.
And what's so fascinating here is trying to understand Mao's core motivations, which were, well, they were layered. He was certainly concerned with preserving his own power, of course, but he seemed to genuinely believe the revolution itself was in jeopardy. He saw this new CCP apparatus developing privileged bureaucrats, the very people he called capitalist roaders. These were party members he felt were maybe advocate for slight economic shifts or a return to old conservative values. He saw all of that as neo-capitalism.
Right.
He viewed this entire movement as an essential internal war. A war waged not against a foreign enemy, but against the existing Chinese state and party apparatus. He wanted to achieve what he called great disorder leading to great order. Essentially, you destroy the system to save its revolutionary spirit.
And disorder is precisely what he got. The revolution began officially in May 1966 with that call for a party purge. But initially, some leaders tried to pump the brakes. People like the chairman of the PRC, Liu Shaoqi, and the party general secretary, Deng Xiaoping, they tried to contain the trouble. They sent these special work teams to university campuses to, keep the peace.
And that move immediately backfired, because Mao had a completely different strategy in mind. He told students to just abandon their classes and attack their teachers instead. This is so crucial because it bypassed the existing party structure entirely. So when those work teams sent by Liu and Deng tried to manage the student unrest, they were attacked by the students themselves, who saw them as trying to stop the revolution.
And these radical students, they're the key actors here, the Red Guards, they were quickly armed with Mao's instruction and organized by Lin Biao, who was the head of the military. They were encouraged to create what quickly became a reign of terror. But Mao also had to prove he was still the one driving all of this. So in July 1966, he makes this dramatic public reappearance. He swims the mighty Yangtze River at Wuhan, and he was 73 years old. The reports we're reading, they suggest this was less a spontaneous swim and more a massive propaganda stunt. One observer called it a stage-managed extravaganza.
Right. It was all about projecting this image of tremendous strength and vigor.
Yeah.
Fueling the belief that he was still this superhuman driver of events.
And that very visible stunt was immediately followed by a political earthquake.
In August, Mao summoned a meeting condemning revisionist tendencies. And this meeting confirmed the downgrading of his political rivals, like Liu Shaoqi. And it officially elevated Lin Biao, the military leader who organized the Red Guards, to second in command. The political establishment was just being strategically demolished.
And you could feel the momentum instantly. On August 18th, 1966, over 1 million young people, mostly students, packed into Tiananmen Square.
An incredible scene.
They were chanting slogans, singing, "Mao Zedong is the red sun rising in the east." This wasn't just a rally. It was a massive youth-fueled demonstration that energized the whole movement. It signaled to the entire country that the old order was dissolving.
And Mao consciously chose to manipulate that boundless enthusiasm of the young. He wanted them to feel empowered to destroy the old world. Famously, he gave students at Tsinghua University a banner reading, "Bombard the headquarters."
Right.
Just openly encouraging them to criticize anyone in power. He remarked that they needed more monkeys to disrupt the palace, to overthrow the demons and monsters.
Okay, but if the goal is to purge the bureaucracy, why start with attacking culture? How did Lin Biao justify redirecting all that revolutionary zeal from the party center to, ancient relics?
Because the goal was total societal transformation. Lin Biao identified the specific targets for this mass mobilization, the four olds. And this included old ideas, old culture, old customs, and old habits. By attacking the symbols of the past, they solidified the revolutionary consciousness of the present. It was an ideological justification for the cultural destruction that followed.
And destruction is certainly the defining word for this initial phase. This campaign against the Four Olds led to widespread organized vandalism. Millions of families were affected as Red Guards targeted any relics of the past. Cultural items, temples, shrines, works of art, all destroyed in massive waves. And just think about the physical scale. In Beijing alone, 6,843 places of cultural or historical interest were burned or ruined.
Wow.
And 1,000 statues were smashed. This was ideological cleansing, codified by that famous Red Guard slogan, "To rebel is justified."
And that permission to rebel, it shifted very quickly from cultural destruction to outright political destruction, and then to personal terror in late 66 and into 67. The Red Guards moved from relics to people. The sources highlight the specific, brutal targeting of key party figures who had resisted Mao, particularly Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping.
These high-ranking officials faced public denunciations and what were called struggle sessions. And it's important to define this term for a second. A struggle session was a form of organized psychological torture. It was designed explicitly to break a victim's will, to procure a confession, and to induce guilt in front of a huge crowd.
Yeah, these sessions involved severe punishments and public humiliation. They would seize anything that suggested decadent tendencies, like Western-style clothes or jewelry. The most common physical torture aimed at humiliation and pain was the airplane position, forcing victims to bend over with their heads pulled back, often for hours on end while being just verbally abused.
It's important to just pause and realize that these were not abstract political purges. These were brutal, physical acts of psychological warfare aimed at breaking a person entirely. And we see the tragic consequences in the fate of the leadership. Liu Shaoqi eventually died in solitary confinement in 1973.
Yeah, after being deprived of proper medical treatment.
And the personal tragedies were horrific. Deng Xiaoping's son, Pu Fang, was thrown from an upstairs window by Red Guards and left permanently paralyzed.
It just illustrates how swiftly that revolutionary zeal transformed into systematic savagery. One former Red Guard recalled seeing a teacher beaten and left bleeding in a fountain. By late 1966, this violence was systematic, not isolated. The reports show that 67,000 deaths occurred in Beijing and surrounding areas alone, just from these initial campaigns, often followed by imprisonment under corrective labor.
So by 1967, the CCP leadership starts to realize the movement had gone way too far. I mean, the sheer zeal of the Red Guards had led to infighting among themselves, national chaos.
Industrial production was suffering, all the schools were closed.
Right. Mao had achieved his goal of purging his rivals, but the nation was functionally breaking down.
Exactly. The movement had served its purpose, purging Mao's rivals. So now, the revolution needed a new course. Orders were given for the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, to step in and restore order. And this is a crucial turning point. We're moving from anarchist student terror to methodical military control.
So once the PLA gradually restored order, Mao needed to get rid of the very people he had empowered. Those uncontrollable, tumultuous gangs of youth who were now just disrupting the state. And this led to the ultimate demobilization campaign, up to the mountains and down to the villages.
Which ran from 1967 to 1972.
Yeah.
And over 12 million young people, I mean, a truly massive cohort, were moved from the cities to the remote countryside. Officially, this was presented as a revolutionary experience, to learn the dignity of labor. But the underlying motive was just pragmatic urban security. It was the state's way of neutralizing a generation of radicals they had created.
And once the Red Guards were dispersed, the violence shifted again, dramatically. We're moving now from that anarchist student terror to methodical, state-organized violence, all under the banner of cleansing the class ranks between 1968 and 1971.
And this new campaign was coordinated by the Central Cultural Revolution Group, the CCRG, and the hardline Maoist faction known as the Gang of Four. The Gang of Four, which included Mao's wife, Jiang Qing, they became the ideological managers in the late phase of the revolution. And this stage was a massive state-sponsored pogrom aimed at rooting out all real or potential enemies, often using just the flimsiest evidence to accuse people of being capitalist roaders.
The scale of this official violence is just terrifying. The reports reveal 22,900 people killed in Inner Mongolia, 84,000 arrested, with nearly 3,000 deaths from torture in Hebei province, and 15,000 cleansed in Yunnan. This was official terror, executed by the state apparatus that Mao had supposedly purged.
It shows that the violence was internalized and organized from the very top.
So by 1970, Mao checks the excesses again. The revolution had entered a final, painful stage. It's defined by political decline and a looming succession crisis.
Right. And the relationship between Mao and his nominated successor, Lin Biao, it just deteriorated rapidly after Lin's elevation back in '66.
In that political tension, it just explodes into betrayal in 1971. Lin Biao was killed fleeing towards the USSR after a suspected assassination plot against Mao failed.
The news of Lin Biao's fall was actually kept secret until 1972. And when it was finally announced, labeling him a traitor, it just shocked the population.
Deeply.
Deeply.
Of course.
Lin Biao was the man who organized the August rallies, who compiled the famous Little Red Book. His official denunciation publicly discredited the Cultural Revolution, and crucially, it reduced public trust in Mao's own political judgment. People had to ask themselves, if Mao's chosen successor was a traitor, what did that say about the entire movement?
The belief in this permanent revolution just started to crumble. So as the chaos subsides, the political knife fight begins in earnest. Zhou Enlai, the premier, was trying to restore some degree of pragmatic order, and he facilitated the return of the exiled pragmatist Deng Xiaoping in 1973.
But Deng's moderation was quickly targeted by the powerful ideological fanatics, the Gang of Four, led by Jiang Qing. They launched this bizarre campaign called Criticize Lin Biao and Confucius.
Right.
And this wasn't really about a historical philosopher or a dead successor. It was a veiled attack, secretly aimed at undermining Zhou Enlai and Deng Xiaoping and stopping their moderate reforms.
And the real end of the course was signaled by the death of Zhou Enlai in January 1976. This triggered a massive demonstration in Tiananmen Square that April. And while the demonstration was officially mourning Zhu, it was really an implicit, enormous show of support for his moderate policies.
And a direct act of defiance against the hardline Maoists in the Gang of Four. The protest was brutally suppressed in what became known as the Tiananmen Incident, and Deng was dismissed again from his post. But the course of the revolution was effectively over. Mao Zedong died in September 1976, and the Gang of Four, they had no political authority, no military backing beyond what was delegated by Mao. His death removed the very foundation of their power and ensured that the Cultural Revolution simply could not continue.
So what does this all mean for you? We've tracked a decade-long course that started with an ideological declaration against capitalist roaders and just quickly spiraled. Through revolutionary zeal, cultural destruction, party purges, military intervention, and systematic state-sanctioned terror.
He was, of course, defined by these cycles of political maneuvering, of anarchy and betrayal, all initiated by one leader trying to preserve what he believed was a permanent revolution. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire course of the Cultural Revolution was Mao's desperate attempt to use mass mobilization to bypass and destroy the state and party that he felt had become complacent. And this raises an important question for you to consider. While the political battles at the top define the beginning and the end, how crucial was the massive, widespread disillusionment of those 12 million young people who were exiled to the countryside?
The very people Mao empowered.
Exactly. How crucial was their disillusionment in fundamentally undermining the revolutionary spirit he hoped to make permanent? Something to mull over.